Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live Keynote broadcast, an introduction to the All of Us Research Program, presented by Katherine Blizinsky, Policy Director, All of Us Research Program, National Institutes of Health. I'm Alexis Krause of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are delighted to bring you this educational web seminar presented by LabRoots. LabRoots is the leading scientific social networking website and producer of educational virtual events and webinars. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this event is interactive. We encourage you to participate by submitting as many questions as you want at any time you want during the presentation. Just click on the Ask a Question box located on the far left of your screen and type your question into the box that appears on the screen. We'll answer as many of your questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. If you have trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, please click on the Help Desk button located in the promotional board at the bottom center of your screen, or use the Ask a Question box to let us know that you're having a problem. This presentation is educational and thus offers continuing education credits. Please click on the Continuing Education Credits tab located in the top right corner of the presentation window and follow the process to obtain your credits. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Blizinsky. I will now turn the presentation over to her.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today. I'm really thrilled to be here and have a chance to talk with you a little bit about the All of Us Research Program, which is part of the National Precision Medicine Initiative. So before we jump into talking about All of Us, let's be clear about what we mean by precision medicine. Precision medicine is a personalized approach to improving health, treating disease, and finding cures. It acknowledges that each person is unique in our habits, our environments, and our biology, and that the interaction of these factors greatly impacts our health. This complex heterogeneity also means that a medical treatment that works for one person might not work for another. So a good example of this would be eyeglasses. Each of us has specific vision needs, from correction strength to astigmatism to focal distance, and that means that one person's glasses won't work for just anyone with vision impairment. So rather than using a cookie-cutter one-size-fits-all approach, precision medicine aims to deliver the right treatment for the right person at the right time to keep people healthier longer. It's a pretty radical shift in how each of us can receive the best care possible based on our distinct biological and social and built environments. So 2015 marked the inception of the Precision Medicine Initiative, a trans-agency directive to usher in a new era of precision medicine for all. This initiative incorporated activities of the Departments of Defense, Energy, and Veterans Affairs, the National Institutes of Standard and Technology, and the Department of Health and Human Services, and several agencies therein, including the National Institutes of Health, of course, the Food and Drug Administration, the Office for Civil Rights, and the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. The Precision Medicine Initiative, or PMI, was established with a mission to enable a new era of medicine through research, technologies, and policies that empower patients, researchers, and providers to work together towards the development of individualized care. To guide these efforts, the White House commissioned a task force to craft sets of principles to shape the initiative's privacy and security safeguards, as well as its ideological framework. These were the PMI Privacy and Trust Principles and the PMI Data Security Policy Principles and Framework, which you can access on the All of Us website. In 2016, Congress passed the 21st Century Cures Act with broad bipartisan support. The act codified PMI and authorized about $1.5 billion in funding for the initiative over 10 years. In addition, it included a number of provisions that indirectly sculpted PMI, including pervasive language on health disparities and diversity, provisions on data sharing, and importantly, language around data privacy. While PMI is still very much a cross-government initiative, the bulk of the PMI effort rests in the hands of the National Institutes of Health. It is NIH that is leading the efforts for the All of Us Research Program. And it's to all of us that we will turn next. The All of Us Research Program is truly an unprecedented effort to build an immense longitudinal data set offering utility to a cadre of scientists from myriad biomedical fields. So we're talking about comprehensive data, demographic, biological, and socio-behavioral on 1 million or more participants over, we're hoping, decades to lifetimes. But perhaps what is most exceptional about this program is not its unprecedented size or the multimodality of the data that it helps to collect, but its dedication to diversity, both in the scope of the participants it hopes to engage and in the range of researchers that it endeavors to serve. The program exists as a consortium of partners across the United States, and we'll be adding additional partners over time. These consortium partners serve different functions, from storing and distributing data and participant samples, like our Data and Research Center and Biobank, to building our website and mobile apps, to interacting with participants and prospective participants during the enrollment process and beyond. So the All of Us Research Program is organized around 8 core values that we'll kind of walk through now. I think this is a really great way to get to know the program, both from the perspective of our principles, but also to highlight many of the issues that have been the primary foci of much of the program's work to date. So first and foremost, we're called the All of Us Research Program for a reason. And that's because our goal is to allow for participation by any interested individual so that this resource truly represents all of us. To make it as easy as possible to participate, the program has created multiple ways to enroll and take part. Right now, there are 2 primary paths to enrollment, either directly through a website or a smartphone app, or through a participating healthcare provider organization, or HPO. In the future, we're hoping to provide additional paths that make it even easier to participate in all of the facets of all of us. So a large part of enabling participation across communities and demographic strata is ensuring broad accessibility of the informed consent process. All of Us has taken great pains to draft all participant-facing materials, including the consent documentation at the 5th to 6th grade reading level. Approximately 90% of Americans age 18 and older read at or above this level. So by enforcing these readability standards, we enhance the approachability of our program to the vast majority of eligible individuals. Our consent process is modular, meaning we've broken up facets of the consent requisite for full participation into smaller, more manageable pieces. At present, we have 2 consent modules in place: the primary consent, which incorporates consent for biobanking and genomic testing, and the HIPAA authorization for disclosure of electronic health records, or EHR data. Next on our consent agenda is consent for the return of information, so that we can provide participants with access to the information the program generates about them. We've also instituted a multimodal consent workflow. Studies have shown that relatively few research participants grasp salient facts when presented with traditional consent modalities. So to encourage comprehension, we present the consent materials in both audiovisual and text formats, and follow each module in the consent process with formative evaluations to ensure participants have grasped those key facts. In addition to promoting participant understanding of the program, we're also using the outcomes from these evaluations to guide improvements in our consent process, helping us pinpoint areas that may need further explanation. The consent process is 100% digital. So if our objective is to reach the most people possible, we don't want to limit ourselves by restricting access to the program to discrete physical locations. A recent analysis by the Pew Research Centers estimates that 89% of Americans 18 years of age and older access the internet on a regular basis. So by leveraging the reach of the internet, we're vastly increasing our participant catchment potential. While this also creates barriers to involvement, we're working on solutions to facilitate enrollment and participation across the digital divide. So if we truly endeavor to be a national program, we must also allow for participation across the entire country. And for that, we've needed to ensure our consent materials comply with all relevant state and territorial laws governing these processes. So some of the ways in which state-specific statutes have manifested in our consent drafting process has been around things like the mandatory inclusion of the California Experimental Research Subjects Bill of Rights for participants enrolling in that state. Some states also have laws around medical information disclosures that require valid authorizations to single out particularly sensitive data types, including mental health and substance use diagnostic and treatment information, sexually transmitted infection status, and the results of genetic testing. And then there are other state and territory specific statutes that, among other things, determine like the age of consent and create requirements around expiry dates and witnessing of forms. We've had to adapt our consent pipelines to meet these demands, which has been a challenge to say the least. But all in all, we have a total of about 14 different flavors of the entire consent process. But assembling this variety of consent pathways pales in comparison to what we've begun next, which is the consent around the return of genetic results. So from an initial survey, there were at least 29 states with specific statutes pertaining to the disclosure of genetic test results. But in truth, there's probably actually significantly more than that. This will no doubt further complicate the intricate consent landscape of all of us. We're in the midst of that effort now, and I will be sure to come back and let you know how that goes. So while the program has made major strides in enabling program access to large swaths of the American population, we still have a ways to go, both to encompass a broader participant base and to allow access to the full complement of all of us activities. So one of our first orders of business after launch is to expand eligibility. At present, the program is only able to enroll individuals at or above the age of majority who are able to consent on their own. But the program is working night and day to expand its capabilities and hopes to be able to offer enrollment to serve a wide range of prospective All of Us participants in the very near future, including specific efforts around children, American Indian and Alaskan Natives, incarcerated individuals, individuals with decisional impairment, low literacy populations, and individuals with linguistic or physical barriers to participation. We also want to enrich our current consent materials to facilitate greater understanding of and engagement with the program. So this includes a sort of choose your own adventure consent workflow that allows participants to choose the modality of the data that's being presented to them. A layered consent as well, with informing loops that let participants delve deeper into issues that are highlighted during the consent process, and options for individuals with low literacy, the design of which will be heavily influenced by ongoing research into this area by Sage Bionetworks and Vanderbilt University, two of our consortium partners. And last but not least, as the program grows and develops, we will be adding more consent and informational modules to support program activities. I mentioned previously that next on our agenda will be consent for the return of results, but this is by no means where our consent pathway will end. So second of our values is that the program must reflect the rich diversity of America. As you may have heard me mention at least a couple times already during this talk, All of Us seeks to enroll participants from diverse backgrounds and walks of life. Inherent in that mission is the ability to engage the full complement of prospective participants, but that doesn't just mean considerations for individuals that are protected by specific laws and regulations. That also means enfranchising groups of people that have been drastically underrepresented in biomedical research up to this point. As late as 2016, only 19% of genome-wide association study, or GWAS, populations consisted of individuals of non-European descent. Research has repeatedly demonstrated that genetic risk findings are not universally applicable, that certain variants confer differential risk in populations with dissimilar ancestry. This data just reflects GWAS and specifically looks at ancestry, but similar discrepancies exist when examined through the lens of social factors like race and ethnicity, despite the fact that such social factors are known to contribute to disease risk and health outcomes. Clinical research overall has generally been conducted in overwhelmingly white and often male populations, and the paucity of inclusive data is a major driver of health disparities in this country. In light of these deficits, the 21st Century Cures Act included a number of provisions with the objective of improving representation in biomedical research. The Precision Medicine Initiative was specifically charged with ensuring the participation of a diverse cohort, and we've embraced this charge wholeheartedly, adopting a fourfold concept of diversity. We've spoken quite a bit about demographic diversity, but we're also looking for diversity in health status. This is not your conventional disease cohort. In addition, we're also seeking out genetic diversity. We want to build a community with people from across the United States. And finally, we're committed to collecting a diversity of data types, because this is a data set to serve a wide and varied scientific community as well. To accomplish our diversity goals, we structured a rich and multi-pronged engagement strategy implemented by a network of healthcare provider organizations, direct volunteer partners, and community partners that meets communities where they are, is sensitive to their needs and concerns, and also provides a strong foundation for trust building that will hopefully extend beyond the program itself. So that last bit is particularly important because developing the kind of data set for which we're striving requires consideration that often the groups we're trying the hardest to reach are historically marginalized and oppressed communities that may be wary of scientific enterprise and government involvement. So in order to be successful, we must earn these communities' trust. In addition to the aforementioned activities, we're hoping to earn that trust through conscientious, robust, and respectful engagement and full transparency, and by empowering participants as partners in this endeavor, our third and fourth core values. So when we say we regard our participants as partners, we mean it. A huge part of ensuring this program serves diverse communities is listening to those communities and incorporating their views and feedback into the structure of the program. We're trying to involve participants deeply in multiple aspects of our program, from deciding what kind of data we collect and what lab analyses we run on participant samples, to the kinds of research conducted with the data resources and the processes by which data gets returned to participants. So All of Us, as we've mentioned, is a longitudinal study, and we're hoping to capture data across people's lifetimes. It's hard to keep people interested in something for that long, especially without giving them something in return. Which leads us to our fifth core value, that participants will have access to information and data about themselves. So as part of our covenant with participants, it revolves around ensuring that participation is a valuable endeavor. And that value can be seen as both public and personal. All of Us offers people a way of giving back by contributing data that will help create new cures for disease, helping to ensure that the data reflects diverse communities, and also by being part of a movement, a revolution, if you will, that makes our healthcare more precise, more personal, and more effective. But it also offers participants the opportunity to learn about themselves through their data. So studies have shown participants overwhelmingly want their information back. It's a major impetus for participation in research in the first place, and that information is something that All of Us can provide. As participants in All of Us, people will have the opportunity to receive information about everything from their individual genomic results to invitations to participate in other research opportunities. At the heart of our stance in the return of information is the concept of autonomy. We believe that the participant has the right to know as much or as little about themselves as they want, as well as to engage with the program at their chosen level. So this may fly in the face of a perceived duty to inform, but we believe that there are legitimate interests in not knowing one's status, particularly when it comes to genomic results, that the right not to know requires an explicit choice on the part of the participant, that providing that choice is appropriate in the context of this program, and that this stance enhances individuals' autonomy. So while far from complete, serious discussions around the return of results, and specifically the return of genetic results, started within this program over a year ago. In March of 2017, we held a workshop where we hoped to assess the state of the field for return of genomic information and to establish basic guidelines for the return of genetic results within the particular context of All of Us. Key insights from that meeting about how to ensure that results are communicated to participants with different needs, capabilities, and interests included, first and foremost, that we need to ask participants if they want data about themselves and how they want that data. This gets back to that concept of autonomy. We also need to develop multiple modes with which to communicate. And for that, we have to get out and get visible with the communities. There are also challenges of the digital divide and low literacy and health literacy. If we're to reach our goals, we need to be cognizant and sensitive to those limitations and build means to overcome them. Success is more likely also if we start small with pilot studies on participant access to information and return of results and build up based on our findings rather than trying to institute a mechanism or mechanisms at scale. In addition, we should sort of take a no surprises policy. We need to be realistic and clearly communicate with participants throughout their participation in the program. And lastly, we don't need to go this alone. We should build upon best practices and learn from others that have gone before us. To bolster the work that's being done within the program, NIH has also partnered with FDA and CMS to commission a study by the National Academies of Science on the return of results more generally. The study will bring together a range of diverse perspectives to perform a review of the current regulatory landscape and best practices, conduct an evaluation of harms and benefits inherent in the present system, as well as consider additional resources or alternative approaches that may improve the process for returning individual level results. Consensus recommendations from that study are expected this July, so not so far away. So in addition to making this data accessible to the participants, we're endeavoring to make a resource that is available to a wide range of researchers from different locations, disciplines, and even levels of expertise, as noted in our sixth core value. That goal of broad accessibility has forced us to become creative with exactly how we can make this work while still protecting the privacy and security of our participants. So initially, we plan to collect 6 basic data modalities that are depicted here. But the data types that we collect will adapt to the scientific and technological climate, as well as to the level of trust built between the program and our participants. In terms of how that wealth of data is made available, we're committed to creating a resource that's accessible to the broadest range of users possible. Our access and use framework consists of a central curated data enclave that exists in the cloud. Users access the data through an analytical portal. So unlike traditional cohorts, there's no data removal from the centralized resource, with the exception of aggregate analytical results. All of the substantive work with the data, including with the individual records and aggregate data, happens in that cloud. So, however, not all user access is created equal. The data we collect is separated by sensitivity into public, registered, and controlled access tiers. Users will be granted access to one or more tiers, and the level of scrutiny an applicant receives depends on the level of access for which they're applying. The three primary tiers, again, are the public tier, and this is data that poses minimal risk to the privacy of research participants. Data in this tier is presented only in aggregate and is binned to help prevent the possibility of re-identification of participants. Then there's the registered tier, and the registered tier data has some risk of identifying research participant and therefore poses some risk to privacy. It can only be accessed after logging into the research platform, and this is the tier where you start getting into individual level data, though more sensitive individual level data is restricted to the controlled tier. Controlled tier data poses the most significant risk to privacy of participants. So things like individual level sequence data live here, as well as clinical notes and narrative data. Then there's sort of a fourth tier of readily identifiable data, and this type of data will require IRB review to access. We've also adopted a data passport model. Instead of project proposals, the approval board approves researchers themselves. After approval, users can then create multiple project workspaces that live in the cloud. And these workspaces can be collaborative, bringing multiple users together on one project, provided that all of the users have the requisite level of access. For each workspace, the user then must provide a description of the project, the contributors to that workspace, including information about those contributors, like when those contributors last completed their ethics training, for example, and then also the type of data that's being used. These project records are then subjected to the panopticon, so anyone can essentially audit the research that's being done in the workspace, particularly for research that could be stigmatizing. If someone comes across such a project, they can flag it, and that flag triggers a review by the program's Resource Access Board. So as part of All of Us, we ask participants to give us very sensitive data. All of Us takes the privacy and security of this information extremely seriously, and our 7 core value that we promise to abide by the PMI privacy and trust principles and the PMI data security policy principles and framework, those documents drafted by the White House Task Force. In addition, the program is engaging teams of experts to conduct rigorous security testing, establish safeguards against unintended release of data, and set penalties for the unauthorized re-identification of participants. We're also leveraging the full extent of legal and regulatory tools at our disposal to help ensure our participants' privacy, including laws like HIPAA, the Common Rule, GINA, and the newly strengthened certificates of confidentiality. The latter is possibly one of our greatest tools to ensure privacy and actually comes from the same 21st Century Cures Act as the codification of PMI. So whereas in the past, the issuance of certificates was essentially optional and the onus for the application for a certificate rested with the researcher, issuance of certificates is now mandatory and automatic for all federally or partially federally funded research collecting identifiable sensitive information. Previously, certificates covered only identifiable information. Certificates under the new statute, however, cover both identifiable information and information that could be rendered identifiable, either by certain technological procedures or in conjunction with other available information. New certificates also cover all copies of such information, as well as associated biospecimens. And moreover, certificates now cover such data and copies of data in perpetuity. Finally, before the Cures Act, withholding was at the discretion of the researcher or research institution holding the certificate. Now, certificates mandate withholding of data covered by the certificate, with several exceptions, from all non-research personnel. This includes withholding from law enforcement. Certificate holders are expected to use all means at their disposal to uphold participant privacy in response to legal demands. But even if data is disclosed, it's immune from the legal process and inadmissible as evidence in legal and other proceedings. This protection is completely new in the statute as amended by the Cures Act. Furthermore, all certificates issued prior to the effective date of the statute are now imbued with the powers and protections of the new law. I feel it's particularly important to clarify these protections in light of the recent news regarding the use of genetic databases to determine the identity of the Golden State Killer. Certificates of confidentiality create robust privacy protections not offered by commercial genetic testing services. In other words, the All of Us data resources, while not maybe wholly impervious to misuse, are not subject to the types of usage that are stimulating the inquietude that are expressed in articles like the ones cited above. So finally, the All of Us research program efforts are meant to enhance scientific discovery. We're aiming to create a resource that catalyzes innovative inquiry broadly across biomedical disciplines. By having rich, diverse, and comprehensive data, we hope to spur research that addresses an array of biomedical objectives, including developing more accurate estimates of disease risk that integrate environmental and biological factors, adding to our knowledge of pharmacogenomics, refining and enhancing our compendium of biomarkers, using mobile health technologies to inform links between activity, physiology, environment, and health, contributing to the eradication of health disparities, and enabling trials of targeted therapies. In addition, we hope that the data we collect will empower our participants with information that facilitates the improvement of their own health. So where does the program go from here? I think in addition to building a resource we have this significant opportunity here as part of All of Us to stimulate research that fuels evidence-based policy development, both from big P and little p policy, and it would be a shame to waste that opportunity. I would go even so far as to say that we have a responsibility to the greater research community to take advantage of it. And we've accepted this undertaking. We envision that there are 4 basic buckets of support that All of Us is poised to provide. So there's support for projects that address policy implications of All of Us or research more broadly that evaluate the implementation and use of various laws, regulations, or policies in the research setting. Also, support for projects that assess the value of research to stakeholders, which gauge attitudes of and impacts on stakeholder groups towards or on research-related topics. Support for projects that directly appraise aspects of research, including the effects of decision or policies on the conduct of research itself. And finally, support for convenings of the ethical, legal, and social implications research community and bioethics communities, so either current convenings or to form new ones. So by the time you will be hearing this talk, All of Us will have just launched nationally. We've been doing a beta testing phase, and we're working like a technology platform company centered on the user experience. So that means we have phased implementation of program facets that are first piloted, iterated, and scaled. Over time, we anticipate new technologies, protocols, and assays that may be integrated into the program. And throughout, we will promise to provide transparency and open access to our protocols to enhance interoperability with other cohorts. As of today, we have nearly 30,000 people currently enrolled in the program, which is well on our way to our goal of 1 million participants. And with that, thank you very much, and I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Blizinsky, for that informative presentation. We will now start the live Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please do so now. Just click on the Ask a Question drop-down box located on the far left of your presentation window, type your question into the box that appears on the screen, and click the Send button. We'll answer as many of your questions as we have time for. So let's get started. Our first question is, why is this program needed?
So currently, and despite the best intentions of providers and researchers, healthcare is often a sort of one-size-fits-all. And All of Us is seeking to advance precision medicine, that healthcare that's based on you as an individual. So our current way of doing this can be costly for patients, providers, and researchers. Patients may not be served well by treatments designed for the average patient. Providers don't have enough information available to provide precision care for many conditions. And researchers spend a lot of time and resources building separate cohorts and creating new IT systems, databases, and analytical tools for each study that they undertake. A single lab's resources may not be sufficient to answer the research questions at hand. So All of Us is about discovering new precision medicine options for providers and patients in the future by providing a public resource that already has volunteers, infrastructure, and data so that researchers can get to the science and the medical breakthroughs based on their discoveries much faster and much easier.
Our next question is, what makes this program different from other research programs, cohorts, or biobanks?
So don't get me wrong, that there are many research programs that offer valuable insights on health and disease. All of Us has benefited from learning from cohort programs that started before ours. And scientifically, more cohorts that we have, the better off we're going to be. Several factors combine to make All of Us a unique research cohort, however. There's diversity at scale. So our 1 million or more participants will reflect rich diversity of the United States, including volunteers of many races and ethnicities, age groups, geographic regions, gender identities, sexual orientations, and health statuses. So it's a very, very diverse cohort and a very large one. There's also many data types. So other large research programs collect limited data types of samples or data, often focus on a specific disease. All of us will combine surveys, data from electronic health records, blood and urine samples, physical measurements, and eventually wearable data to get a more complete picture of human health across many conditions. Also, we view our participants as partners. So with all of us, participants are involved in multiple aspects of our program, with ongoing opportunities to help shape the program with their input. Further, data will be shared with both researchers and participants. Participants will have access to their study information and data about themselves with choices about how much or how little that they want to receive. And finally, broad access. As a government-funded program committed to open data and science, all of us will make data broadly accessible to researchers of all kinds, including citizen scientists, and to support thousands of studies across a wide range of different health topics.
And Dr. Blizinsky, it looks like we have time for one more question. How is this program funded?
So the All of Us research program is publicly funded with resources that are appropriated each year by Congress. The 21st Century Cures Act, passed in December of 2016, authorized a total of about $1.5 billion over 10 years for the program, and those funds are subject to the annual appropriations process. So in fiscal year 2016, we received $130 million. In fiscal year 2017, that was $230 million, including $40 million from the 21st Century Cures Act. And in fiscal year 2018, we got $290 million, including $100 million from the 21st Century Cures Act. And so that is an ongoing process and will change every year.
I would like to once again thank Dr. Blizinsky for her presentation. I would also like to thank LabRoots for making today's educational webcast possible. Before we go, I would like to let everyone know that today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing through August of 2018. You will receive an email from LabRoots letting you know when this webcast will be available for replay. Please share that announcement with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. That's all for now. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.